and gentlemen, I am Tony Leonard, and I've been doing a ZBrush live series here.
Gentlemen, I am Tony Leonard.
Sorry, I'm just doing I've been doing a little bit of setting up. Sorry about that, I forgot to mute myself on the Twitch side. But last week we were building a concept mesh, just really quick, of a spinner. If any of you might know, Spinner was the sort of brand and the title of the flying cars from Bladerunner, from the original film to the newly released 2049, and I was kind of fooling around in the last week, maybe week and a half, sketching some online for those of you who follow my work, maybe perhaps either over Instagram and or Facebook. But I thought I would continue that mesh into this week and build it out, and then we'll go do some interesting things with it in 2D. So, howdy, hey, how's it going? So just I just wanted to check really quick, guys. I did happen to change my mics over the last week. I actually yesterday ordered a nice new mic, so let me know if I sound good. I just want to make sure on the quality assurance behalf if you guys can hear me okay, and if I'm speaking at a volume that is okay for you guys. And then we'll start here in a minute. So I just wanted to get R8 started, and I'm gonna load up my deal again because I had to restart ZBrush. And so let's see, there we go. There we go. So if you guys recall, I was working on this last week, and I believe I had a few requests as far as workflows. One of which that I think I'm going to start off with is doing just a quick append method styled retopology. And that is just so that I can get clean selections and start to kind of harden up and surface a few areas. Mostly to do with the larger part of the cab and the pylons on the side. And then probably there's some parts on the very end here where I kind of set up just some general shapes. I did want to go in and probably do some new Boolean features on. So, you know, this round shape and this here, I think I just blocked out really quickly using the Z modeler. I tried not to touch it over the last week so that I can. Oh, cool! You can hear me well. All right. So just, you know, let me know if there's any like side noise or anything like that. Like, you know, I have fans and stuff going because it's a little warm where I am in Los Angeles. So let me know. But back to this model. A couple of things that I wanted to explain is I'm probably going to try to do some Boolean operations for the top of this, and then once I go out of live Boolean and actually make, you know, like a unified mesh out of it, I think I'm going to append it and bring it back in. And one other request was to get in there and maybe do some panel looping, so I'll try to see what I can do. I may retop just a really quick, you know, version of the cab, you know, in sort of a low, and then divide it up, and then do some panel looping off of that. I don't know, there's a couple of different ways to do panel looping. In fact, let's go back to the body here and turn that on, and then I'll shift click. One thing I noticed with R8, if you guys have just switched from R8 to a couple of other, I mean from a couple of other previous versions like, you know, R6 or 7, I noticed that there's an interesting thing with showing the subtool and showing all. You know, it used to be where you could just click on one and all of them would show, but now I believe it's hitting shift and clicking on it and clicking back on it, it should show all of them. So I guess when you hide individual pieces, they stay hidden, but you need to shift click them to show them all. Right? Sort of like so. Or in some cases, you know, when you get to working with things, you could always use dynamic solo or solo. But for this, just really quick, I have like just a really kind of dirty Dynamesh cab section here that I was using to kind of flush out some of the shapes. And again, if you guys want to stop me and ask me any questions, you know, feel free in the chat to. I'll try to keep my eyeballs peeled both to ZBrush and also to the chat so I can answer questions. but I'm just going to be doing some basic modeling on this guy here now that I've kind of formed out a shape that I kind of generally like. And I think I just stamped out, stretched a Dynamesh piece made from, I think the original shape was like a Z-modeler Q-cube. And then I just stretched it out and turned it into Dynamesh and started carving in. So the reason why a lot of these details look, kind of muted is that I just made them for landmarking. And what I'll do is I'll just use like a dynamic standard brush and start sketching literally on the clay to kind of make sort of like a modular impression of different areas. I also, a lot of times, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar or knowledgeable about this brush, but there's a really cool brush that I believe his name is Michael Hernandez. I forget his middle name, but he goes by Mollicus the Black on ZBC, and a long time ago he came up with the great maw cut brushes, which are great sort of impression brushes, very similar to the Damien standard. I use A and B a lot. One is sort of like a straight bevel carving into the clay, and the other has sort of a large bevel to it. And they're really cool for doing kind of stuff like this, where you're detailing up a surface and you need like a cut line, but you really want to just make it like sort of normal information and not an actual, panel looped line or anything like that. Really cool to use. But I use them a lot for sketching because then I could sectionalize little pieces and tear those out by polygrouping certain spots. So like even if you were to look at my Dynamesh piece here, there are certain areas that I kind of plucked out geometry. Some of those have their own polygroups. Or I thought about splitting up and maybe just doing a retopology of the front forks, and I could isolate it by just having a simple painted on mask and then hitting Control W and changing that to a polygroup. So that was kind of a basic that I went through. So for now, what I want to do is, just to have a clean build of the cab, what I'm going to do is add an appended Z-sphere. So I'll do this, and then I'll turn on transparency. And here I'll turn dynamics a little off, and maybe grab a darker material to use so that you can see this on the inside. So the Z-sphere I just placed as an appended subtool. You can see in the subtools menu here, I will select this, make sure that I can actually look at this as well. And just very quickly, I'm going to make sure that this Z-sphere is on the inside and scaled down a bit. So I'll just use E as the shortcut key, and I'll scale it down, and making sure that this Z-sphere is on the very inside of this manifold mesh, right? So it's sitting dead center on the inside of it. Now, just for visual confusion, not being confused, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take this and just take the scale and just make it teeny tiny. Right about there, that'll work, right? And kind of old school tricks, I mean, you can actually do something like, if I really needed this cleaned up, I could use the Z remodeler to do it, but I think I want to actually use some of the polyflow in this as part of the design, so I can very much harden the edges to this very quickly. And what I'll do is I'll just show you. So take this, I'll open Adaptive Skin maybe, and I believe Topology, and I'll go ahead and edit the topology and hitting Q. And this way, of course, I want to make sure symmetry is on. So just looking at the transform, activate symmetry. That way what I'm drawing on one side as far as polys will end up on the other side. And then I'll just go ahead and start from some large blocks here. So clicking here, here, here. Right? And I'll control click from here, here, here. Click here and here. And so every point that's being connected over this edge, the cursor is actually literally turning green, right? And then hitting A, I'll be able to preview, A and Shift F, I'll be able to preview these. So, hit Shift and A. And from here, I'll just go ahead and control click and continue on. Let's see, I'll break this up here, here. Yep, sorry about that. Yeah, no, I'll leave it. Actually, let me take this control click here, down, moving this along. I guess I can split it. Here. So, if done quickly, this is just like a little way to get some really quick, very specific topology to use later. And if you've never done topology in ZBrush, there's a couple of different ways to do it. One is an append method, like so. And this is something that I kind of like to teach a lot of students of mine when they're dealing with ZBrush, just because, if you're unfamiliar to ZBrush, like say if you're a 2D person and, you don't know how to use like hard surface a lot, using some of the, sculpting a concept mesh or like just a basic mesh and then doing topology, giving yourself, some better polish flow even is sometimes a good idea. And I'll kind of show you why as I finish this out, but it's kind of one of those things like watching paint dry. Just going around trying to figure out where some of these polys should sit the best way. So I'll just... And by the way, when I move around some of these vertice points, shortcut keys that you can use is W to move it. So let's say if I have a small draw size and I select the vertex, I can literally just move it around, kind of control some of that point order. So there, straighten it out. And you could do literally the same, like if you had an organic model, it's all the same tool. So I think in some ways, probably in the last stream I did, I very quickly kind of ran over using the topology brush as well, which is another way to get some cool topology going, and especially just create like low polygeometry for use for maybe subdividing that and then having new geo to work with, like if you needed a piece of armor or something or an accessory, you could use the topology brush for new pieces. The only thing with that one versus this one is I think you have to specify a thickness this way, and the topology brush, whatever your brush size is going to be what the thickness is. There we go.
Okay, bye.
Oh. Thank you. Sorry. Sorry about that, folks. Got a little bit of background noise going. There we go. I'll close that off. Bring this down here. Actually, I'm thinking I'm going to create another extra loop out here so I can be clean about this. So I've gone halfway around this pylon, or the fork section here, and so again if I just hit A, and one thing that I want to see is the polyframes of this, and I believe right now this is set so that I can preview in Dynamesh, so that if I turn the Dynamesh resolution all the way down to 0, right, and then a density of like say 1, I can literally see how the shape and the geo is turning out, right? So by default, I think in R8 it might be that when you do topology in this way, you can actually change you can retopologize something and then change the Dynamesh resolution, and it will actually give you like a higher resolution for it. So I'm going to go ahead and finish closing off some of these sections here. So I'm going to hit A again, go back, and close it up, because I think Got more geo on the bottom. I just want to capture sort of some of the general shape, so I'm going to go around some of the contours. So I'm control clicking there, going in here, 1, 2, 3, close that. And sometimes, even if I don't close these up, hitting A, you'll notice that it actually will interpolate the position of the points and actually close the face off. So that's actually kind of cool. The only thing that you want to be careful of with something like this is, like, if you're trying to stay all within quads, just watch the flow so that it knows how to close it in a quad, because sometimes you'll close it with 5 sides. I think it would probably maybe discolor, or just check your faces, how many points it has. That way you don't have any mistakes in whatever your mesh is. But go back. Go. Close it off on hand. So I'm just going to stick to something kind of low here. There we go. Rembrandt's paint would be interesting, I'm sure, to watch it dry. Oil takes forever to dry. I believe I've actually heard this once. I've never seen a painting like this, but when I was more into fine arts painting, I actually heard that some paintings in Europe that are like hundreds of years old actually still have wet oil underneath. Can you believe that? It's crazy. So yeah, without varnish, it takes a long time to dry. There we go. I'll just go ahead and close this off. Take this guy over there. I'm just going to bring this over to the side. There we go. Keep closing up loops for the front and make sure that this tries to make sense. There we go. So I'm just doing a really quick dirty topo to kind of be able to take some of these edges, and I want to crease them up in certain shapes. There we go. So now when I look at it, I can see what surfaces are. I'll frame the mesh hitting F, and I just want to see which faces are yet to go and around the other side. So I'll hit A again and go back. So A is a preview key. So I'm just going to control here, try to close this up really quick. So a lot of times I know, like, stuff like this usually only depends if you're doing a subdivided model, which a lot of folks don't always do these days, but I like it just for hard surface, because then I can kind of work with the surfacing of the raw shape. And so now if I look at it, so I'm gonna cut these in two, and it'll probably seal off the back and close the hole on the inside and work with it. So I have that shell now. So what I can do is I can just take this, make adaptive skin, come back up here, go and append the new shape. So here's the skinned Z-sphere. Take it, it puts it in, go to the bottom of this list here, take preview off, and now I can actually just, since I don't need this anymore, and it looks like it's all in working order on this piece. So what I'll do is I'll just take the Z-sphere, and I'm not going to delete it, but I'm just going to save it, but clearing the topology. So if I take a delete topo and take the edit off, the Z-sphere will be left, but I can come back and use it for another piece, right? Because I've already appended the new shape that I wanted to build. So that's one quick way to just take a piece and build it out. And another way, I believe I explained to you guys last time around, is just painting a mask on and plucking that shape out. So I'm going to try it. But first, I want to show you this. So here's the piece that I just built out, right? And it's pretty firm. And if I use dynamic subdivision, it's a newer feature in ZBrush, I'll geometry, and so dynamic is not on, but if I hit D, I say always yes. So this is without anything, without any creasing, and dynamic subdiv I can turn up and it would be a little smoother, maybe to 4. So I want to harden up this shape. So I'm going to hit Shift D and take this out. It's got a little wonky up front, but I can flatten that out. So for now I just want to hit B, Z, and go to my Z modeler. Yeah, don't work in oils anymore. Yeah, acrylic is of course faster. But for this, I'm just going to take it and hit the Z modeler, go to crease, and I'll just do absolute partial. Come around, harden up just like a few select edges. And where I don't want it, if it overextends past the partial loop, I'll just hit Alt and hit the edge, and it should take the crease out. So I'm going to do it here. And just do edge, and I can Alt click the edge and remove the crease where I don't want it. So I just want to hit this beveled section here. So I'll put a crease there and keep going along this edge. There, and we'll put one here and here. Here, one along here. So kind of following the contour of the fork and how it was. Put one here, to here. I'll do edge loop partial again, and we'll do that. Terminate there. So now when I look at it, if I hit D for dynamic subdivision, I can see what areas are creasing up the hardest, right? And I'll use that a little bit later. So I'm going to hit Shift D again, continue creasing in a few spots. Alright. Also here, partial edge loop there. Maybe here on the bottom. I'll add one edge here. And even if I was working in dynamic subdiv, I could do this and see how it would be hardening on the fly. So if I look at it as a smoothed view, I can still click on some of these edges and harden those up, and you would see how they are going. So all the edges are actually highlighted as I'm working on them, when I'm working on them. There we go. So at least a cleaner piece to originate some geometry from versus last time around. If I turn the polyframe off, you can kind of see how it's heading up. And maybe right here there's a crease that I want to take out. There, keep it a little bit smoother. There. Yeah, that'll be a good shape. Cool. Okay. And that I'm looking at is maybe I should take and close off some of the holes back here. But for now, I think I want to leave it. Yeah, just leave it there. Leave it open-ended so I can work with it later. Because I'm not sure how I want to, maybe in between this stream and the next time I do a ZBrush Live, which I believe will continue into November. But I want to keep these pieces separate, so I'm not going to yet close this hole off. I want to actually deal with it a little bit later. But if I wanted to start surfacing this now that I view this, no poly frames, and subdivide it, I like the shape of it. Oh, here's a piece that we missed. Actually, partial to here, and click here. Yep, that looks better. Alright. So naturally, you know, this shape you can do actually some Boolean pieces to or something like that, and so let me actually show how to do something like that. So right now I have just a low piece. The poly resolution was set down when I drew out the Z-spheres. It was just set down to 1 for the density. So I get some really just basic geo. Right, and now that I've creased this up, I can actually subdivide it, and some of those shapes will hold wherever I put a crease in, right? So that all of the hard edges are there. So sometimes, you know, when you're dealing with something, one of the things that I describe in doing hard surface modeling is that a lot to people is, I never see an actual edge that is this hard. It would have to be very hard molded to be that way. And so I could kind of toy with that, I believe, using dynamic subdivision and QGrid. Or I can actually go into deformation. Let's say, for example, if I, let's see, so dynamic subdiv, and I believe my smoothing is up to 4. I'll bump it up maybe just a little bit to 6. And if I apply that, so now this is just a basic poly mesh with subdivisions attached, right? Up to level 7. So if I made it 6, it's actually going to bump it up to 7, right? So something to remember whenever you're using dynamic subdivision before you apply it is whatever that number of subdivisions and the preview plus 1 is what it'll be in the geometry tab, right? All right. Now we have that piece, hide the Z-sphere. So this is basically where that piece is going to go, and then we can build off of that. And one other thing I was going to talk about, let's go back to the body again. There's 2 different body shapes that I'm using, but I'm going to be building some shapes from this. So before I try to go ahead and do like a retopo again of just like, say, the same spot, or the entire CAD section of this, I thought I would use also the topology brush to show exactly kind of some of the same stuff. Just really quick. So I'm going to go BT and show, here it is, topology brush. And this one works off of curves. So, you know, if you're drawing out like a clean curve shape, right? And then crossing these. So I'm just going to draw some really basic lines here. Okay, so this is one polyface where I closed everything off, right? And then of course there's some overage, and I'm going to use that to my ability to build some of the rest of the geometry out. But this shape is basically just like, you know, a vert and an actual edge. When you close them, the preview for a face will turn yellow, right? And I can actually get rid of some of these stems of overage where the curve is actually overdrawn. I can just hold Alt and cross over it and delete it. So if you've never used this tool before, it's been actually around. It's nothing new for R8, but I believe, I can't remember which version actually, the topology tool. I think it was it 4 or 5 maybe, or 4 or 4 or so? I wanted to think it's that. Yeah. But it's great. It's really cool. So like if I wanted to build off of this, I could create just some short pieces. As long as I keep drawing from that white little stem there, where the path actually extends, then as long as I'm crossing all of these, I can end up with faces and end up with new geometry to use. Because what it'll do is I'll just split it off and I'll have a new piece to work with as a subtool. So close this here. Get rid of these. Get rid of this. Get rid of this. And keep drawing with this. And of course, I'm actually going to the very end here where it turns green and keep continuing with drawing along the surface of this. And when I close them, they will actually close the faces. Right? Yes, it was 4R4. In fact, 4R4, I think, was the first time I had bought. I had a Mac before I went all PC. I think 4R4 was the first version that I actually just, ponying up and got. It was great. Loved 4R4. It's awesome. There we go. So I'll clean some of that up and then continuing to draw from some of the same places. Oop. So there, I'm actually not getting a cleaned edge, so I'll delete it. And I'll just, oops, sorry. There we go. Actually misclicked. There we go. So for the door, I could use like a piece of geo like this. And if I clean this up, just going over those stems, holding Alt again, so I can make sure that I'm getting the cleanest piece possible. And then I can take and just set my size of brush. So let's say maybe about 14. And if I click on the geo, then it commits it to geometry. And so right now you'd be like, well, what am I really looking at? And so what you're looking at is the actual shell, the concept mesh piece that I used, and then it actually, a part of the same subtool, made new geometry with the thickness of my brush. So if I actually do a split, so I'm going to come down to split and split unmasked points, it'll split it into a new subtool. And so now I have that shell piece to work with. Right? And it has its own polygroups. And it has its own creasing in it, which is awesome. So now, if I just wanted to work with this as a piece of geo, then I can totally do that. Do the same thing as I was doing just previous on the forks. So I could come back to the Z modeler and harden up this piece. So the door, the bevel on the door, using I believe a edge loop partial. Just harden this really quick. Here, here. And then I could use dynamic subdiv to see how it's shaping out. So probably somewhere in and around these corners I need a couple of more creases. And it'll be a nice firm piece that I can sculpt into. Right? And of course, I can use some other modeling tools. Like if I wanted to use edge loops to actually harden up the edges instead of using creases, I could do that. So, just insert and just single edge loop should do it. Oops. There. And on here. There we go. I'll put one here near the edge. Oops. that edge. Now, yep, hardened even a little bit more. I still think I need a crease on the corners there, but at least reinforced edge loops kind of worked as well. So I'm going to go in here, do a little bit more creasing. So I'll tap that one. That one's already done. That one. This one here. This one here. So I'm just putting in a few extra creases where I think it might soften out. Maybe one here. So make sure that's creased, that's creased. This one here, wherever it takes a little new bit of direction, maybe I'll put one there. But actually, get rid of that. Get rid of that. Oops. Sorry, I hit my Windows key where I was trying to hit my Alt key. Okay. So that's what it looks like smoothed. And actually, I don't know. This guy, I think I'll take him out. There we go. So that becomes a nice little shell piece that I can use and sculpt up later. And I can actually add more thickness if I wanted to by using the ZBrush tool. But I could also use this piece and do some, if I wanted to copy it. So let's say, for example, I wanted to make a duplicate and work with it. I could take this and change it into a Dynamesh if I wanted to, and then do a little bit more sculpting up and have the piece if I wanted to. So I'll just take this and do like 580 Dynamesh on it with polish, and it'll convert it, and I can smooth it out, right? So it changes it. Actually, before I did that, it would have been better to actually apply subdivision to it, and then delete it, the lower subdivision, and then go ahead and try to Dynamesh it, right? And then that should be super clean. But one of the things that I was also going to mention before when I talked about the deformation palette, I forgot to mention, is that I could take it and offset some of this hardness. Usually with QGrid you could do something like that, but a lot of times what I'll do is if I'm going to work in Dynamesh, I'll go ahead and just take and just do like a little quick polish or relaxing and polish. So I'll just do that now. So polish crisp edges. Maybe at a low point, just so you can see how it looks. Maybe soften it up just a little bit, or use smooth. You could use smoothing a lot as well. Okay. Or you could just get an actual brush and smooth some of those edges out just a little bit, right? Because now this is sculptable geometry, so you can just do whatever you want to it. Just for fun, I grab like a standard brush. Oops. And oops. There. Let's see if I can cut out a nice little mask here. Okay. So I'm just painting on a general mask. I'm not being really specific about anything, but I'm kind of thinking about just a shape of a window that I want to make. And what I'll do is I'll make this actually polygroup section, and then from the polygroup I'll take it and maybe do something of a panel loop on it. Panel looping is one of those things like you have to be careful because there are a few different ways to do it, like doing an inner or outer piece, and what it'll do is either it will cut a hole in a mesh and leave it blank, or it will just add the loop for the sort of cut lines that you want to create, and then it creates a bit of thickness. So depending on where you know what you're doing or where you want to go with it, you have to kind of be careful about what you set. There we go. Doug, sorry, I just noticed a previous question that you were asking, and you were asking, can I remove all the extra lines and verts that are hanging out by holding Alt and drawing another line anywhere else on the mesh? I believe you can. So in other words, wherever you have laid out any of the topology brush, like if you draw a curve on one part and then maybe you skip and draw lines on another, wherever those are closing is where it's going to create geometry, right? So I'm just going to blur this once and then holding Alt, sharpen it back up, right? That just blurred it and just made it a little bit cleaner. It probably contracted it a little bit, and then I sharpened it again by hitting Control, Alt, and clicking on the mask, and that will harden it. So I'm just going to go in again, make some shape changes to this little cutaway that I'm going to do. Clean up some of it. There we go. There we go. There we go. And I don't know if I want to go into the glass this much. So I'm going to cut some of this down a little bit. There we go. Get away from the edge just a tiny bit. Alright. Boop. About there. Or hey, you know what we could do is we could cut this shape out here. That would be cool. Clean this up just a tad. Right there. There we go. And I'll make this a polygroup. So that way I'm actually going to use transpose. At least I'm pretty sure that, yep, there we go. And with transpose, it's kind of interesting. If I have, like, say, the move or something, I can actually just control and click on a polygroup and mask it out. So that way I just have my window. And then I'm going to actually go check out some of my settings for panel looping. So under the edge loop, panel loop. So it'll be double. Yes, with 5 loops. Thickness. I'm actually going to make this a little thicker. Let's see. Polish 5. So anyway, let's just try it. I'll leave it the same profile. So pretty much when you do a panel loop, if anybody's never done it, sorry, Doug, I was just reading your comment. The tip aside for making an interesting model is to create a model that you can use for illustration. Yes, of course. So I'm actually kind of doing something kind of clean, because what I'm going to do is, once I have some cleaner parts arranged, you know, more of a sort of finite drawing, I'm actually going to take this and place it into Keyshot and do a render. And from that render, I'm going to actually add some toon shader material onto it, and then I'll be able to use that rendered line art to do more line art on top of it and actually render it out into something. Like if I wanted to do a concept painting of it, or if I wanted to do comic book, like actual hard surface design for use in a comic, so that I don't have to draw a very complex shape over and over again. What I can actually do is just take all of this, put it in to KeyShot, render it. I can also use this BPR with a material inside of ZBrush that would be sort of like a line art render. Take that and put it into Photoshop and then separate the line art, and then I could use it any way that I would like to. So that's kind of the end goal. Very similar to what I did previous. Like this is just a screenshot of the model that I'm actually working on right now. So if I was to render this in 2D, I could actually take this line art and then separate it and do some really cool stuff with it. So even if I'm not, say, if I'm a novice or even not a professional 3D modeler or anything like that, I can use it just to block out some shapes, and then from those shapes I can derive line art, and then line separate this and turn it into something that I can use. So let's say, for example, even if I had gone through the modeling process already and I had modeled this, I can save this. Actually, hold on a second. I can do a save as, and I'll just do, you know what, actually this is already saved. So let me just see here. Photoshop. Hold 1 second. I'm just going to start up Photoshop. And if I wanted to find the other one, very similar to something like that, I can do a redraw over the lines and come up with something like this. This is actually a collaborative piece that I'm working with another artist, John Fry. He's an awesome industrial designer. Was doing some things that we were collaborating on, but it's in similar fashion. I could just place the render right into Photoshop and either draw a new line art, or I could render it as line art. So I'm actually going to see if I can find really quick one that I was just showing you. Yep, that's it. So I can take this, and if I am dealing with the mode being in grayscale, I actually have made an action for separating line art. So I'll just do it really quick just to show you how it works. So from all of this 3D modeling, even though, if I wanted more detailed, more clean lines, especially in the contour and width of the illustration, I think it would be best to clean up some of the parts and harden them, because the stuff that is lower geometry actually shows better with line width than, say, something that was Dynamesh. Although some of those contours I can pick up as detail and work with. But now that this is in sort of like a grayscale, I can take and just very quickly use an action that I created right here, and post scanning just to clean up the line art, and then I can separate the line art. And it happens so fast you probably don't notice, but here at least I have the line art itself separated from a background, and I also have the channel. So you're doing a line mask, right? And this line mask can become a selection and then filled on a transparent layer. And then from there, if I wanted to take, say, and use color, I can flip this over to RGB or CYMK and perfectly paint and or draw. Oops, sorry. I had some things on the other screen. So I don't flatten when I change the mode. And then of course I can add layers. And go ahead and paint underneath. But more importantly, if I want to redesign some of this, I can turn this line art down in its opacity, use it almost like a piece of tracing paper or onion skin, redraw and clean up some of these inside of Photoshop and do either a rendered painting, or for comic line art, you could even dim this down and print it to board, and you could ink this by hand directly. Does that make sense? So I think next time in and around, I'm just going to finish this off really quick. I can set profiles for any of the panel looping, but I just want to do a simple cut and see how it looks. And I'll go ahead and panel loop it. And so it increased the thickness. Probably with some group smoothing would be a little bit better, but if I clear it, it looks like so. And I can make certain cut lines and whatnot and details on the drawing. So I don't want to commit to that. I want to actually go back. Let's see. There we go. And then actually, if I clear this mask, I believe I just want to show this piece. I can actually use the transform, or excuse me, deformation to smooth by group, or polish by group. And I can smooth out some of the edges of this a little bit better. There we go. So I'll polish this group just a tad. And then I'll select it. Try doing a panel loop again. With the thickness, I think I'm going to scale back a little bit. So of course I have this set on double, so it's probably double-sided, or I can append it. I think this default is 0.01. I'll do that and see how it looks. So a little bit better. Click and drag and remove. And at least I have a little bit of clean line for window detail. And of course, since this is different geo, I could probably take and sync this in or raise it up if I wanted to. Yep. Some of the edges look a little nasty. I might have to clean that up. But something like that would be great. Actually, this window piece here, I actually have to go back and redo it because what I wanted to do is actually cut a piece of geometry literally out using a boolean. So I think I saved this mask and the poly group and separate it and then create a shape and boolean it out, which might actually be cool. Okie doke. So I'm running almost an hour and a half. Any last questions that you guys wanted to ask me before I continue on? If so, do let me know. So I got a few more minutes, so let's just do this. Look how everything looks together. So I did a little quick retopology tool, and I did a little bit of panel looping. I think actually I need to clean up a few pieces before I do panel looping again. I actually want to cut this out, literally out of the geometry, so I want to save it for a boolean next time around. So next time I do this, I'm probably actually going to touch this over the course of the week and progress a little bit, and then I'll show and try to explain how I cut out each section. So I've done a little bit of topology and or surfacing by using 3 different methods that I should probably mention really quick. One was that I took out some parts using the topology tool. So just laying on curves to make edges and vertices, and creating an actual piece of geometry to work with and edit in ZBrush. And from the concept mesh itself, I actually used also the append method by using a Z-sphere, placing it on the inside, and redrawing topology. So for your surfacing, and by surfacing I mean cleaning up a lot of the geometry, but also the shaping of certain parts of a model, you can do a quick topology using a append method, Z-spheres, placing those on the inside, increasing them, and then subdividing them using the dynamic subdivision. And then also, I think in the previous stream, I worked out how to just draw a mask onto the object, and being able to pluck out those shapes, close the holes on the back of it, and then use the transpose to do sort of a crude extrude on the outside. And that's basically just to have almost a sort of guided shape. So whatever the panel shape was that I drew as a mask on got plucked out, and then I closed the hole so that it would have some thickness and just pulled out the back of it. So if I was to look at this rear piece here, I'll just alt click on it, and then I'll look at it in actually solo. This was actually plucked off of the surface of the car. I think after I tried to reshape a few areas, I wanted to have some extra bits where I could show how to do, just like a flat object and then cut it from it. And this is basically a piece where I'm not using topology per se, I'm just using Dynamesh, and I'm using things like a clip brush, clip curve brush, and I'm coming in and I'm literally going in at an angle and cutting off a piece using a curve, right? And this is a great way to just do some shaping. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll get rid of symmetry. Get rid of symmetry, and with the selection, symmetry was on, sorry. So take symmetry off, and click, drag, Control, Shift. So if I do Control, Shift, clicking and dragging, letting up on the Control and Shift, and then hitting Alt, hiding one side of it, and then in your modify topology, you can take and just delete hidden, and then work on one side, right? So this side I'll just literally take and I'll do a little clipping, because if you do clip curve and symmetry, sometimes you get some wonky results on shapes that are on the inside. So like on the inside of wherever that axis was, if I try to close it off at a weird angle, sometimes it'll clip the other part in half. So you just want to be careful. So that's why I just work from one side once I create a piece a lot, because I could do something like this, shape it up. Let's see here. I want a clean cut, right? And then I could just, from a resolution that's a little bit higher maybe, let's go 580 with polish on, and I'll Dynamesh it, and I re-Dynamesh it. A lot of the cuts that I make will be a lot more cleaner, because basically what the clip curve does is it just flattens the surface, so I can get some clean shapes that way. And here I could use like a curve by just tapping once, Alt on the keyboard, tapping it again, works almost like a Belgier curve. And then we have a cleaner surface on the top there. Maybe the angle didn't work right for this little piece there, but cut it. Yep, something like that. Smooth this out. So then at least if I go on another topo run or something like that, or if I use a ZBrush, I can have a clean piece to project some details back on and get the edges, planar surfaces back on. Alright? So it's pretty cool. No worries, Dad. Cheers. Yeah, I just I'll work up some pieces like this and show you kind of how I do them. I probably will have a go at it during the week. There we go. So I'm just using the hard polish to smash that piece back down, smash some edges back, and then what I'll do is I'll just do a mirror and weld. Oop. Actually can't do it from that side. I think I was looking at it the other way, but that's okay, because I know how we do this. We go into deformation, mirror that, and then go back and mirror and weld from the X side over. Okay. And there's our touch cleanup piece. Okay. So from now I've got some sculpting to do, and I will sculpt this up and make it a little bit more complex. And I'll probably try to do some extra clips. I'm going to see how I can maybe get those guys to you. And then I think in my next one I want to make it a little bit more formed, and then I'll take it to 2D for paint over. And there's a couple of different ways that I'm going to do paint overs coming up soon. One will literally be taking this, doing a toon shade, and then working with that line art similar to the fashion in Photoshop. Then 2 will be actually trying to render paint it in Photoshop. And then 3 will be sort of outside of concept art and actually say doing it for something like comics. And I may actually do an illustration where I can actually use this model as a block out and create something new by hand by taking the line art that I rendered from this and then redrawing that in pen and ink, like literally on paper. So there might be a coming stream that I show you what I do on the computer and then what I do by hand and how I redigitize it and get it back into a format that I can work with it in CG. Okay, so thanks for joining me today. I think I went just about an hour. But if you guys have any questions to forward to me, let me know. I believe that Pixelogic has set up a page where you guys should be able to ask me some questions or either leave comments here on the Twitch channel. And I'll try to answer anything that you guys throw my way. Okie doke. Cheers and thank you. Have a good weekend. And thanks for joining me. Stay tuned. Thanks again, Pixelogic. Awesome.